His #1 website. This is an ABC News special, the 2000 vote. Now reporting from New York, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our Election 2000 coverage. We're waiting in one respect for one more shoe to drop, and I'll explain in just a moment, but it's 8:30, and the polls have now closed in one more state, and that state is Arkansas. And we believe that in Arkansas, it is now still too close to call. Arkansas, the president's home state, Mr. Bush said just before the end of the campaign he was going to win it. Mr. Gore has tried hard. Mr. Clinton tried hard as well, but it is currently too close to call. So take a look at the map, because that's really is what it is all about, with 270 electoral votes needed to win. And you've heard us talk endlessly throughout the campaign about the big three of Florida and Michigan and Pennsylvania. Florida goes to Mr. Gore, Michigan goes to Mr. Gore, and Pennsylvania is too close to call. The rest of those red states, which are Governor Bush's states, projected by us at the moment, are states in which he was, for the most part, expected to win. There's been no great surprise in any of those. Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Maine, up there in the northeast corner, are still too close to call, but Maine and Arkansas and Missouri, of course, and Wisconsin, which we haven't called yet, all factor very importantly into trying to put a combination of these 270 electoral votes together. And while Mr. Gore has won in Florida and in Michigan now, and got a big boost up to 119 electoral votes as of now, he very, very much needs Pennsylvania. I want to go first to Lynn Scherr, because I think, Lynn, by looking at the exit polls, you can tell us why Pennsylvania is proving such a struggle.
We certainly can, Peter, and the way we're going to do it is by showing you what Mr. Gore's strengths are and what Mr. Bush's strengths are, and that will make you understand why this one is absolutely too close to call. Let's first take a look at the numbers for Al Gore. Those who are supporting him big time include union voters, a third of the vote, 59% going for Al Gore today. Another very important group, those who say Social Security is their most important issue, 66% for Al Gore. Finally, those over 65 years old, about a quarter of the voting population in Pennsylvania today, 58% going for Al Gore. Okay, those are big numbers, but now let's take a look at the numbers for George Bush, because they're equally big on his side. First of all, white Protestants. They make up about half of the voting population in Pennsylvania today, 64% for George W. Bush. Those who say taxes is an important issue, a huge number voting for George Bush today. And finally, those who live in the suburbs. This is a group everyone's been fighting for. This is the volatile, the new group, and the Republicans and the Democrats going for them, 52% going for George Bush. So you see, these two sets of numbers really balance each other, Peter. I don't know who's going to come out ahead.
Well, Peter, that's right. The Tom Ridge could have been picked with Governor Bush, but he wasn't, and a lot of people thought that was a mistake. But Pennsylvania, even though thought it was going to be a good state for Al Gore, now it does look kind of tough. And Peter, James Carville used to, sorry about that. James Carville, President Clinton's former strategist, used to call Pennsylvania Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in between. There's a long conservative stretch in Pennsylvania, but the big cities still go Democratic, and that looks to be part of the fight tonight. We'll be back in a minute.
We were worried the computers would go down. It's the microphone.
We'll be back in 1 minute.
Take the ABC News American Election Challenge. Which state elected the first woman United States Senator? Virginia, Alaska, California, Arkansas. In a moment, the answer. This ABC News special is being brought to you by Merrill Lynch.
My great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, believed that the vote was the tool by which all of the rights are gained. She's provided the shoulders on which women could stand higher. And I think that's a great legacy.
The answer to the ABC News American Election Challenge. In which state was the first woman elected United States Senator is Arkansas. Hattie Caraway was elected in 1932. She was from Jonesboro, Arkansas. Once again, Peter Jennings.
But tonight, the presidential election in Arkansas is still too close to call. My mic indeed did go dead. Thank you, George. 7 or 8 people willing to do that job right at that moment. Before we go to Cokie Roberts, I want to talk to Dean Reynolds, who's down in Nashville, Tennessee, or rather in Austin, Texas, because Dean, before tonight, the Bush people were very confident. How confident were they about Florida and about Michigan?
Well, they were confident in that they told us they were going to win them. But I thought that over the last few weeks, they realized that Florida was not going to go their way. And Michigan, they thought that they could win, but they also knew it was going to be a fight. Now, they are telling us this evening that, well, we don't need Michigan and we don't need Florida, that we have all sorts of calculations to achieve the 270 votes. But it must be galling, Peter, for them to have invested so much time in both states, to say nothing of the fact that the governor's brother, Jeb, is the governor of Florida, and they still lost them.
Well, the Governor Bush spent, what, 18 days in Michigan, 17 days in Florida. Do they really believe in the final analysis that Jeb Bush was going to make the difference? In many states, the governor didn't get as much credit as perhaps he got in the public.
Well, all along, Florida was one of the key pieces to their electoral puzzle. I mean, this is a shocking defeat for them in Florida tonight. There's no question about it. And in Michigan, again, John Engler was supposed to erect another firewall. And as happened in the Michigan primary, Governor Bush ran right into the firewall.
And ran into John McCain. Thanks very much, Dean Reynolds, which takes me to Cokie Roberts. The McCain factor is the first time it's come up this evening.
It is, but you know, an interesting thing, Peter, that happens in congressional races. John McCain has been in 70, that's 70 congressional districts in this campaign year, just working unbelievably hard for Republican congressional candidates. One of those districts was in Connecticut, working against the Democratic incumbent, Jim Maloney, for Mark Nielsen. It looks like Maloney is winning that district tonight because coattails are probably stronger than John McCain is. And Al Gore is winning Connecticut with Joe Lieberman, the senator from there. The two endangered Democrats in Connecticut are probably okay. Similarly in North Carolina, endangered Republican incumbents, but it's a state where George Bush, we've given the state to George Bush. Those Republican incumbents, Charlie Taylor seems to be winning there. But again, in that other North Carolina race, where the incumbent is doing all right, McCain made an ad for him. So John McCain's coattails might be something to look for in 2004, Peter.
And thanks, Cokie. We'll try to get a handle on the Nader factor, too. There's been a lot of talk about the Nader factor in the West, in Washington and Oregon particularly, but he campaigned very vigorously in Michigan as well. Sam, you have a Senate call.
Big call from the state of New Jersey. ABC News projects that John Corzine, the Democrat, has retained that seat for the Democrats. Frank Lautenberg was retiring. He's defeated Bob Franks. Corzine is the former CEO of Goldman Sachs. He poured over $52 million of his own money into this race. Franks made a big deal out of this. Franks spent $4 million. And we know from our exit polls, Peter, this is very interesting, that there was concern over Corzine's spending, but the concern was equally divided. And in the end, people decided clearly by our exit polls that only 1/4 were very concerned and the rest voted for Corzine.
Thank you, Sam, which brings up another set of coattails. In this Senate race, George Stephanopoulos, Corzine tried to connect Bob Franks, congressman, to Newt Gingrich. We haven't heard Newt Gingrich's name before tonight. Played up and down in the election.
Haven't heard too much about it on the national level, in part because George W. Bush did a very good job early in the campaign last summer in distancing himself from the Republican Congress. Mrs. Clinton tried it here a little bit, though, against Rick Lazio here in New York. So Newt Gingrich is starting to fade, I think, in part because of the leadership example George W. Bush set.
Now, John McCain, and this and also for Mark Halpern, our political editor as well, but you first, George, the issue of campaign finance reform, big issue for McCain. Corzine, very big money in the campaign. People at the end of the campaign seem pretty cynical to me that campaign finance reform is still not going to be a telling issue.
It's not going to happen, even though Al Gore has promised that the first bill he would bring up if elected is the McCain-Feingold bill. The question is, I think you were talking about the Nader factor earlier. Were any of his voters drawn by this issue of campaign finance? He had a very strong anti-corporate, anti-special interest message. That's one of the things we'll have to look for later.
But if Al Gore were to win this election tonight, and it were close, wouldn't he be under tremendous pressure from all other Democrats not to go ahead with campaign finance reform?
Well, I don't think he can get away without doing McCain-Feingold after making it his #1 promise. And of course, he'll have the support of John McCain if he does.
Our political director, Mark Halperin, John Corzine winning on money. There were other issues, but money, Bob Franks tried to make money the issue in the final days of the campaign. Campaign finance reform?
You know, a lot of rich candidates have run and lost. Corzine had a big advantage, spent so much money in a state that's so expensive to run in. You know, George is right. Al Gore, if he won, would have to introduce this bill. Cite a colleague of ours, Ron Brownstein of the LA Times. People like the way the country's going to some extent. They don't like the way Washington works. John McCain ran on that, a big deal. I think Al Gore will say this is a way to clean up the way Washington works, and I think that has some appeal.
It may be that I've missed it from Lynn Sherr, but I might ask Lynn Sherr to work for just a moment now on this question of the direction of the country. Fresh start, which George Bush has argued throughout the campaign, or you know, these are great times, why change horses in midstream, as Mr. Gore argued. We're going to be able to project now the state of Maine, way up there in the northeast. We project that Mr. Gore is the winner in Maine. Only 4 electoral vote. As we said, we thought Ralph Nader was a factor up there. We thought he'd work against Mr. Gore. One of the questions about Mr. Nader throughout the latter days of the campaign as to whether or not he could be convinced by a lot of his former supporters who'd asked him to stop making such an effort to take away votes from Mr. Gore. Mr. Nader resisted, but it has not made a particular difference in Maine. 92 and 96, Maine was Ross Perot's best state, so it's a little hard to tell at the moment what the independent vote up there has meant. Sam, on this issue of money, do you see anything as you walk around Washington? How much pressure is there within the political establishment for campaign finance reform, let alone it's been an issue on the stump?
Peter, I've got to tell you, everybody says they're for it. Everybody says that we should do it. But when you talk to individual members, they sort of like, most of them, of course there are obviously exceptions, the present system. Mitch McConnell, the Republican who heads the Congressional Campaign Committee in the Senate, is a dedicated foe of it. Trent Lott is a dedicated foe of it. If the Republicans retain the Congress, my guess is that we'll talk about it some more. But we're not going to have a very major bill. Peter, because one thing is, if you take the money out of it, we're all for that. Who pays for the television time? Who pays for the expenses? How do you do it? Do we go to taxpayer finances? Should I ask the taxpayers out there, you want to finance all the federal elections out of your own pocket? Maybe, but that's the problem. You can't replace something with nothing.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. The Democratic National Committee tells us they're trying in Wisconsin, New Mexico, and Little Rock to keep polls open. They're just trying at this point. They haven't succeeded. George is an obvious answer for that one.
Well, what they want to do, obviously, is get their turnout out at the last minute. And this is an acceptable remedy under most state laws. We're not sure where they're going to succeed, where they won't, but it's certainly legal.
Okay, thanks. We're able to make a call in New Hampshire in the governor's race now. This is not, as said, an enormous surprise. We now project, ABC News does, that in New Hampshire, Governor Jeanne Shaheen, the incumbent governor, she's seeking a third 2-year term, has been re-elected. She was mentioned as a vice presidential possibility for Mr. Gore. She's running against Gordon Humphrey, who established quite a reputation for himself as a conservative when we were in the Senate. Lynn Sherr, on this question of money, I can't remember whether we asked in the exit polls whether money was a big issue in campaign finance for people.
We didn't ask it overall, Peter. We asked it in a few individual states, including New Jersey, as Sam reported. And as he pointed out, the voters didn't seem to care that much that John Corzine had spent all that money.
And Michelle Martin joins us from Washington, because, Michelle, we should not be surprised that people were motivated to give so much money with so much at stake in the election beyond the presidential race.
Absolutely, Peter. If you want to know why this is such an expensive race, there are 2 main reasons. One is, of course, soft money. Those are the large, unlimited contributions that corporations and unions can give to the political parties directly. They're not allowed to give to the individual candidates, which are supposed to be used for party-building activities. But the second reason is expenditures by outside interest groups. Those are groups like the National Rifle Association, the National Abortion Rights Action League, and those groups started fundraising very early because they sensed that there was a lot at stake. Not only the presidential race, but control of Congress and arguably the Supreme Court. These groups were very motivated. And in fact, I talked to Kate Michelman earlier today, the head of the National Abortion Rights Action League, and she said that they started advertising in 1999 when they thought that George Bush would even be the front runner because they wanted to define him early.
Many thanks, Michelle. It's also true the parties like to recruit people who will finance themselves. John Corzine in New Jersey, Maria Cantwell in Washington. We're not close to calling the races in Washington at all, but there's a very tight Senate race up in the state of Washington, and Maria Cantwell has very largely financed her own campaign. Take a look at the national map just